Okay, friends, I've brought you here today to talk to you about my research proposal. It's called The Effects of Reader's Theater on Fluency, Comprehension, and Reading Attitude. And to get started with, I'm going to talk to you about the introduction and the background of what I found in the research. So the first thing I want to explain to you is what is disfluent reading, and that is slow, choppy, expressionless, word-by-word reading that we've all heard our kids do, especially in first grade. We're very familiar with that. But another point of disfluent reading is that it results in frustration and that child not wanting to read anymore. And again, as first grade teachers, we've all experienced that as well. So how to prevent this disfluency? What the research is saying is that you simply need to add fluency into your reading curriculum, and you need to do it daily and explicitly. So why add fluency? As you can see from the picture of the key at the bottom of the page, fluency is the key component to being a successful reader, and it's also a reliable predictor of comprehension, and it increases the overall reading achievement for students. So it not only increases their fluency, but as their fluency increases, you get an increase in their overall reading achievement. And things like their comprehension, their vocabulary, all those things seem to increase just from implementing fluency. So why am I doing this? The problem is that for the most part, fluency has not been taught explicitly in our schools. It's only over the past maybe 10 to 15 years that it's been thought of as important to teach in schools. Although it's always been one of the 5 pillars of reading, it's kind of been ignored. And another problem with fluency is that teachers often rely on the 1-minute time passages, and there's so much more to fluency than how a kid can read or how fast a kid can read. So the problems that we want fluency to fix. In our current state of reading, some of the research that I found said that reading is one of the most important early academic skills for students, yet learning to read continues to be a challenge for many elementary age students. And as K1 and 2 teachers, we know that we see this every day. And as the kids get older, if it's not taken care of now, this just gets worse as they get older. And in fact, that's what this next slide says. It says, many middle and high school students have not been proficient with simple reading tasks simply because they lack those fundamental skills in reading. Some other statistics that I found is that at a national level, only 35% of 4th grade students were at or above proficient in reading, and only 33% of 8th grade students were at or above proficient in reading. So you can see that at 4th grade it was 35%, but it went down by the time that they got to 8th grade. And even starting at 35%, that means that there's 65% who are not proficient, and then that number increases by the time that they are in 8th grade. So what's my purpose and why is this study significant? My purpose is I want to determine the level of effectiveness that Reader's Theater has on first grade students at each of their different reading abilities, so the high group, the middle group, and the low group. And then I wanted to throw in there also how their attitudes affected, how Reader's Theater would affect their attitudes. Would it improve those attitudes of the students who just simply don't like to read? The significance of this study: numerous studies have shown that Reader's Theater is effective. I didn't find one that said that it wasn't effective, but far less have disaggregated the data into groups by reading abilities. So that is what my study is going to add to the world of research about Reader's Theater. It's going to break it down into reading groups or reading levels from the high, the medium, and the low. The theoretical background is called the theory of automaticity. And there's three important things that I want to talk to you about the theory of automaticity. The first thing is that it incorporates repeated readings. Just like if you're a basketball player and you want to get better at basketball, then you have to practice. If you want to get better at reading, then you have to practice. But repeated reading is specifically practicing the same text over and over until you become proficient with that one text. Another important fact about the theory of automaticity is that it says that successful readers only focus on one thing at a time, meaning that if they're spending all their mental capacity focusing on decoding, then they're not going to be able to tell you what they've just read. They don't understand it and they can't comprehend it. So the theory of automaticity says that you need to be able to do this automatically. You need to be able to decode automatically so that you have enough mental capacity left over to comprehend what you've read. And again, as first grade teachers, we've all experienced that. We've heard the kids sound out every word and they've had to tap out every word and they don't have a clue what they've just told you. That fits right in with the theory of automaticity because they don't have any more capacity left to tell you what they've read because they've used it all on decoding. And then there are three stages to the theory of automaticity. The first stage is called non-accurate, and that stage is basically they're having to tap out the words. They may or may not get them right. There's no automaticity in it at all, and they definitely don't understand what they've read. And then in step 2, the second stage, that is called the inaccurate stage. Now this is the stage where they can decode, but that takes up all their mental capacity, so they don't have anything left over for comprehension. And then the last stage is where we want all of our readers to be. They are automatic at their word recognition, and so then, according to the theory, then they can tell you what they've read because they haven't spent all of their time and all of their mental capacities tapping out every word and decoding. So now I'm going to talk to you about the literature review. I'm going to kind of break it down or go from kind of big to small, and I'm going to end up with talking to you about Reader's Theater at the very end. But the first thing in the lit review is about Title I schools, which we are here. We are a Title I school. And so basically what the research says about Title I schools is that in order to be a Title I school, 40% of the students have to be on free and reduced lunch. And I'm not sure about our percentages. I know we hover around somewhere between 60 and 70% on free and reduced lunch. So we are definitely, a Title I school. And then another thing about Title I schools is that the research over and over and over kept talking about the discrepancy between the disadvantaged and the advantaged students. There was some research that said that there seemed to be a little bit of catching up, but most of it said that there's still a big discrepancy between Title I and non-Title I schools. Okay, now going a little bit smaller here, we're going to talk about comprehension, which is kind of the goal for all of our students. That's what we want them to be able to interact with the text, to read the text, and then respond to the text. And then we want them to be able to gain meaning from the text. Our comprehension strategies that we could use, we want to preview and predict with our kids. We want to set a purpose, and setting a purpose just gets them focused on the reading so that they know why they're reading this text, and they can have a purpose for doing that. Also, another comprehension strategy is to make a mental image. We can do this with our read alouds and have the kids picture in their heads what the story is about. And then other comprehension strategies are to ask questions and make connections. I know that we all kind of ask our kids, you know, we don't have time, or we tell our kids we don't have time for stories right now. But if they're making those connections to what we're reading, then that they are able to remember that story and comprehend it better. And then the last comprehension strategy is that good readers are able to use context clues to figure out words that they don't know. Okay, now going down even smaller in the lit review is what is fluency. And there were many definitions of fluency out there, but so I kind of took those and put them all into one definition. And the definition that I came up with is reading. Fluency is reading with accuracy, so you get the words right. It's reading with automaticity, so you're saying it fast enough but not too fast. It's reading with prosody, so you're chunking those words together and you're giving expression to what you're reading. And then because you can do all three of those things, then you're able to gain meaning from the text. You're able to comprehend what you have read. So the components of a fluency program, the literature suggests that you should do these three things every day in your fluency program. The first one is model read. Now, even though the students aren't reading during the model read, they are listening to a fluent reader. And hopefully the idea here is that they can take the strategies that this model reader has modeled for them and then use it in their own reading. And then the repeated reading I've touched on before. It's reading the same text over and over until that child is fluent with that text. And then assisted reading is where a child listens to a more fluent reader read a passage, but then reads along with that more fluent reader. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the relationship between fluency and comprehension. There is some discrepancy in the literature about what comes first. Is it fluency? Is it comprehension? Do they come together? So some of the research says that fluency precedes comprehension, so it comes before. So you have to be fluent before you can comprehend. Some of the research says that these two things develop together, and then while other research says that fluency is an outcome of comprehension, so that you're comprehending, therefore you're fluent. So on to, well, about this slide, as being a first grade teacher, I'm kind of, from my experience, I'm kind of going with fluency precedes comprehension. Just from what I've seen in the classroom, I don't think that kids are going to be able to comprehend before they're fluent. So I think they have to be fluent, and then they're able to understand what they've read. Okay, what is repeated reading? Again, I've touched on this before. It's an evidence-based strategy. It's designed to increase fluency and comprehension. And like I've said before, you read a text over and over until you have reached proficiency, or until you've reached that desired level of achievement. So now, why Reader's Theater? Reader's Theater is a specific way to teach fluency. So there are many advantages of it. If kids know that they get to practice or that they get to perform after they practice it over and over, then they're more likely to want to practice. It's also beneficial to struggling and non-struggling readers. And one that I like a lot is that it requires no props, no costumes, no scenery, so you don't have to spend your time setting up the stage to get ready. You spend your time practicing with the students and helping them to convey the story with their voices, with their talking, how they're saying it, getting them into character. So the last thing in the Lit Review is, how does reading attitudes affect all of this? We definitely know from research and from just being in the classroom that reading attitudes are linked to reading achievement, and girls have more positive reading attitudes than boys, and readers with poor attitudes may choose not to read when other options are available. That makes perfect sense to me. I'm sure that makes perfect sense to you all. We have those readers who don't like to read and they would rather do anything but read. So there is a model that goes with this. It's called the McKenna model, and it basically says what I just said before, that our poor readers are going to have a negative attitude toward reading. So we need to help them experience success. So success breeds success, kind of with our reading. Let them have good experiences more and more. But kind of a caution to this is that those positive experiences that the poor readers have, that only affects their attitudes just a little bit. So we want to make them have more and more and more. It's tougher to get them to like reading with just one or two positive things of reading. They need lots of positive experiences with reading to change their attitude. And then I think I've mentioned this before, but my research questions are: what effect does participation in Reader's Theater have on reading fluency among students at each level? So I want to measure the students at the high level, the medium level, and then the low level, and see how Reader's Theater affects their fluency. And then I want to see what effect does Reader's Theater have on comprehension at the high, the middle, and the low. And then last, like I just went over, I want to see how the attitudes of these of our readers at the high, the medium, and low play in to their reading abilities. And then how am I going to do this? I'm going to talk to you about the population, the procedure, the instruments, how I'm going to collect the data, and then how I'm going to analyze the data. First, the population is going to be our first grade students. My room is going to be the treatment group, so we'll actually be the one that's receiving the Reader's Theater, and then one of our other first grade classrooms will be the control group, and they will just continue on with their normal reading curriculum. And then the data collection is going to come from our STAR. That's going to measure our comprehension. The Ames Web is going to measure our reading rate. And then the multidimensional fluency scale is going to measure the other factors of fluency, because there's so much more to fluency than just reading rate. And then I have the early reading attitude survey, and that's going to measure the students' attitudes. So the research procedures, basically I'm going to obtain permission, and then I'm going to collect the baseline data in the control group and in the treatment group. And then in the treatment group, I'm going to go ahead with Reader's Theater. And then at the end, I'm going to collect data. So the data analysis that I'm going to use are going to be t-tests, and that's what's going to test for the reading rate and the comprehension scores. And then for the reading attitude survey and the fluency scale survey, that is going to be with the Wilcoxon sign rank test, and both of those tests just measure the difference in the means. Okay, and that's all I have for you today. So are there any questions? Yes, Ms. Miles.
So you mentioned struggling readers a lot throughout your presentation. According to what you've done, what is a struggling reader?
Well, according to the research that I've found, struggling readers are those that even though they've been given effective reading instruction, they're still not on grade level. Anything else? Yes, Ms. Brown.
Will you be able to use the early literacy STAR test as your baseline?
No, I can't use the early literacy test because the next test that we take, they will actually have to read it, and then the early literacy test, they just listen to it. So I've got permission from Donnie Anderson for us to take the STAR comprehension test, and then again take the STAR comprehension test when it's over. So that's going to take care of that. Okay, well, thanks for coming.